forces killed 4 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin. Also, South Africa is economically crippled by a serious electricity crisis and repeated power cuts. And Sierra Leone's police chief has said that ex-president Ernest Bai Koroma was a suspect. Hello and welcome to What Stories and Viewer Television as we take a look at top stories making the rounds from across the globe. My name is Zainab Ibrahim. We'll bring you these stories and more after this short break. Please don't go away. Now, the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has sought to avoid humiliating defeat for his latest plans to send migrants to Rwanda that has split his ruling Conservative Party. Now, the safety of Rwanda, which is the Asylum and Immigration Bill in Sunak, answers to a unanimous Supreme Court ruling last month that deporting asylum seekers to Rwanda was illegal in international law. The Interior Minister James cleverly admitted the plans were novel and pushing at the edge of the envelope, but addressed the court's concerns. Extreme action was needed to break the business model of evil people smuggling gangs, preying on the vulnerable, he told MPs before a debate and crunch vote on the proposal. Now, the bill is part of wider government action to cut record levels of regular and irregular migration that is likely to be a key issue at next year's election. Talking about the West Bank killing, Israeli forces killed 4 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank city of Jenin. Now, the Palestinian Health Ministry reported the ministry did not provide further details on the fatalities, while the Palestinian Red Crescent Society said they were killed in a drone strike on the old city. Around 270 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli fire and settler attacks in the West Bank. Now, Palestinian officials say as violence has escalated in the territory since the outbreak of the war on October 7 between Israel and Gaza's militant rulers, Hamas, there was no immediate comment on the killings from the Israeli military, which has occupied the West Bank since the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Now down to South Africa electricity crisis. South Africa, economically crippled by a serious electricity crisis and repeated power cuts, plans to increase its nuclear power production, which is currently marginal. This was an announcement made by the government to date. Africa's leading industrial power has only 1 nuclear power plant, the only one on the continent, but the Coburg plant near Cape Town is only operating at half capacity. Now, the government announced today that it has launched discussions with several potential suppliers for the acquisition of new production units. This could be conventional reactors or small modular reactors, which are less powerful but also less costly. Zizamel Mbabo, in charge of nuclear power at the Ministry of Energy, told a press conference that he hoped to see the first reactors in service by 2032-2033. Talking about the election allegations, the federal prosecutors asked the U.S. Supreme Court yesterday to rule quickly on whether former President Donald Trump has immunity from prosecution, so his trial on charges of conspiring to overturn the 2020 election can go ahead as scheduled. Now, the Supreme Court said it would expedite a consideration of the petition and that it would take up the case and ask Trump's attorneys to state by December 20 their position on the special counsel's request. The former Republican president's historic trial is scheduled to begin in Washington on March 4, 2024. Meanwhile, Trump's lawyers have repeatedly sought to delay the trial until after the November 2024 election, including a claim that a former president enjoys absolute immunity and cannot be prosecuted for actions he took while in the White House. U.S. District Judge Tanya Chutkan was to preside over the first ever criminal trial of a former president rejected the immunity claim on December 1st. Now on to Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry in the Gaza Strip said it had exhausted its supply of children's vaccines, warning of catastrophic health repercussions. The announcement came more than 2 months into the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza, as international aid organizations have warned about the dire conditions in the crowded Palestinian territory. Now, the ministry did not specify which vaccinations have run out, and its claim could not be independently verified. Tedros Ghebreyesus, head of the World Health Organization, warned earlier this week that Gaza's health system is on its knees and collapsing, with 14 of 36 hospitals only partially functioning and supplies running low. Now, the risk is expected to worsen with the deteriorating situation and the approaching winter condition. He said the Gaza Health Ministry called on international institutions to deliver urgently needed vaccines to prevent disaster. Now, there was an attempted coup. The Sierra Leone's police chief has said that ex-president Ernest Bai Koroma was a suspect in the organization of the November 26 event, described by the government as an attempted coup. Now, the Inspector General of Police has confirmed that former President Ernest Bai Koroma is a suspect in the ongoing investigation into the November 26 coup attempt. The government then said in a message on social network, Mr. Koroma, who led Sierra Leone from 2007 to 2018, was questioned for the 4th time on Tuesday by police in Freetown. Now, the government had announced on Saturday that he had been placed under a regime akin to house arrest. According to Sierra Leone authorities, some of the Mr. Koroma's former guards are suspected of involvement in the unrest of November 26. They have published a new list of 54 wanted persons, including ex-President Koroma's daughter, in connection with this event. According to the Minister of Information, the security forces also recovered 29 of the 47 assault rifles and 5 of the 7 rocket launchers belonging to the suspected co-plotters. Now, on humanitarian crisis. The head of United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees has accused Israel of laying the groundwork for the mass expulsion of Gazans across the territory borders in Egypt. Now, more than 2 months of deadly war between Israel and Hamas, sparked by militant groups' October 7 attacks, have displaced most of Gaza's population. But Palestinians are largely barred from leaving the narrow besieged territory. In an opinion piece published over the last weekend in the Los Angeles Times, UNRWA Chief Philippine Lazzarini pointed to the worsening humanitarian crisis in Gaza and the increasing concentration near the border of displaced civilians who fled the fighting, first in the north and then further south. A spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Ministry office responsible for Palestinian civilian affairs did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Lazzarini's accusation. Now, talking about Egypt's election, the Egyptians went to the polls yesterday in a presidential election overshadowed by a war in neighboring Gaza, and with little doubt in the incumbent Abdel Fattah al-Sisi would secure a 3rd term in a country gripped by the most severe financial crisis in its recent history. Now, inflation has hovered near 40% after the currency lost half its value and drove up the cost of imports. Now, the economy is at the center of Egyptian concerns. Even before the current crisis, about 2/3 of the country's nearly 106 million people were living on or below the poverty line. Voting will take place on Tuesday between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. each day, with the official results announced on December 18. Some 67 million people are eligible to vote, 5 million of who had cast their ballots by 4:30 p.m. yesterday. According to a statement from the National Election Authority, turnout is expected to be a key indicator of public sentiment in an otherwise uncompetitive election. Last time it fell 6 points to 41.5%. Now, talking about the Niger post-coup, the leaders of the Economic Community of West African States met in Abuja for talks about the region's deepening crisis after 4 countries fell under military rule and with risk growing from Sahel jihadist conflict. After coups in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Niger since 2020, the 15-nation ECOWAS bloc also saw member states Sierra Leone and Guinea-Bissau report attempted coups in recent weeks. The regional bloc has decided to set up a committee of 3 leaders to negotiate with Niger's military junta on a transition to democratic rule and to consider easing sanctions. President Bola Tinubu, who is the chair of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State and Government, said the Sahel alliance by Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, which is under military dictatorship, would not lessen ECOWAS' resolve to uphold its primary objective. Now it is time for us to go on a quick break, and when we return, What Stories continues.
In this 21st century where all the information we need is now in the palm of our hands. News from around the world, entertainment, celebrity gossip, sports, and much more. The only thing that you need is the right source. Viewer TV is now on the go. Simply check us out on our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter for all the information you need.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm at the Envoy Hotel, Diplomatic Drive 305, here for a business weekend. It's been an amazing stay. Conference hall and business facilities here are stylish and innovative. The Envoy Hotel is luxury, esoteric, opulence, for ultimate comfort.
Discerning travelers, we are more than just a place to stay. We are an icon of comfort, style, and thoughtful luxury. We are Envoy Hotel.
By December 22nd, all French soldiers and their logistic would have definitely left Niger, said the Nigerian Armed Forces in a statement. Welcome back to What Stories on Viewer Television, where we'll bring you on a summary of top stories from across the globe. Moving on, we are still on the Niger post-coup. All French soldiers deployed in Niger as part of the fight against jihadism will have left the country by December 22nd. This was announced by the military regime that came to power in a coup in Niamey, the final stage of a departure that began in October. By December 22nd, all French soldiers and the logistical will have definitely left Niger, said the Nigerian Armed Forces in a statement. This is the culmination of a deep divorce between France and Niger since the generals came to power in Niamey in a coup on July 26. They quickly demanded the departure of the 1,500 French soldiers deployed to fight the jihadists and announced several military agreements signed with Paris. After a long standoff, France agreed, and Emmanuel Macron announced that the withdrawal would be completed by the end of the year. On Tuesday, the Nigerian army stated that the process of disengaging French troops is continuing so far in a coordinated manner and complete safety. Now on the impeachment inquiry, the U.S. House of Representatives has voted in a bid to formalize an impeachment inquiry into the President Joe Biden. Escalating Republicans battle with Democrats ahead of the 2024 election in a move Biden himself slammed as a baseless stunt. Republicans seizing on Biden's sons, Hunter's controversial international dealings, is yet to provide evidence of corruption by the president, and the Democratic-led Senate would be unlikely to convict him even if the inquiry did lead to an actual impeachment trial. Regardless, the procedure guarantees Republicans a new, high-profile platform to attack Biden as he campaigns for re-election and to distract from the federal criminal trials facing his almost certain challenger, Donald Trump. Now, the vote of 221 to 212 was along strict party lines, with every Republican voting for it and every Democrat against it. Talking about the Allied Democratic Forces. Now, the Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni said that around 200 members of the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF rebels affiliated with the Islamic State group, were killed in Uganda-led airstrikes in September in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Originally, mainly Muslim Ugandan rebels, the Allied Democratic Forces have been active since the mid-1990s in eastern DRC, where they have killed thousands of civilians in 2019. They pledge allegiance to ISIS, which now claims some of the actions and present them as its Central African province. They are accused of having massacred thousands of civilians in the DRC in recent years and of carrying out jihadist attacks on Ugandan soil. Now, the Uganda and the DRC launched a joint offensive in 2021 to drive the ADF from their Congolese stronghold, failing so far to end the group's attack. Talking about anti-corruption policy, a former top official at one of China's largest state-run banks has been arrested for alleged bribery, state media reported on Thursday as Beijing cracks down on corruption in the country's financial sector. Now, the case of Zhou Qingyu, a former vice president of the China Development Bank, has been transferred for examination and prosecution, state news agency Xinhua reported, citing the country's top prosecutor Zhou 61 was under investigation for taking bribes and using his influence to solicit bribes. According to Xinhua, proponents say the policy promotes clean governance, while critics say it helps them purge political rivals. Recently, the campaign has targeted some of the country's top financiers. Last month, Sun Desun, the former president of the state-owned China Citibank, was sentenced to life in prison for illegally receiving property valued of over $130 million. Now, the former vice chief of the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China and a one-time Bank of China chairman are among several others under the same investigation. Well, the United States has announced its readiness to resume cooperation with Niger on the condition that the military regime that came to power at the end of July in a coup commits to a notably brief transition. You will recall that Washington suspended its cooperation with Niger after the July 26 coup that overthrew the elected president Mohamed Bazoum during her visit to Niamey since Tuesday. Now, the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State for African Affairs held discussion with several Nigerian officials, including the Prime Minister appointed by the military, Ali Maman Lamine Zain. She emphasized that the Nigerian military power must announce a deadline for a rapid and credible transition, leading to a democratically elected government. In their response, the military proposes a maximum 3-year transition period before returning power to civilians, with a duration determined by a national dialogue that will be conveyed immediately. On Niger coup, Niger's ousted President Mohamed Bazoum, who has been held in detention since a July 26 coup, must be freed immediately. Now, the court of the West African bloc, ECOWAS, ordered this on Friday. The court called for his immediate and unconditional release and ordered that Bazoum be reinstated, according to the judge, in the case heard in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Now, Nigeria is currently suspended from the Economic Community of West African States after the presidential guard overthrew Bazoum and put him and his family in detention. Now, Bazoum has been held in his presidential residence with his wife and their son since he was overthrown. Nigerian militaries or rulers did not immediately respond to the ruling as other member states have in the past ignored rulings from the ECOWAS court. Recall that in the mid-September, the deposed president appealed to the ECOWAS Court of Justice to obtain his release and the restoration of constitutional order in the country. Talking about this F-35 fighter jet, now a Dutch court has dismissed a case brought by human rights organizations against the delivery of F-35 fighter jet parts, which are used by Israel in its war in Gaza. Now, the district court in The Hague ruled that it would not halt the export. Delivering the parts is primarily a political decision that judges should not interfere with. It's reasoned. Now, the United States own F-35 parts are stored at a warehouse in the Netherlands and they're shipped to several partners, including Israel, via existing export agreements. However, the NGOs, including the local branches of Amnesty International and Oxfam, argue that the supply routes makes the Netherlands complicit in the war. Dutch authorities said it was unclear whether they even had the power to intervene in the deliveries, which are part of a US-run operation. A human rights lawyer for the plaintiff, Lisbeth Zebgel, dismissed that claim as nonsense. Now, the Dutch government, she asserted, is familiar with what she termed the enormous destruction of infrastructure and civilian centers in Gaza. Now, the British police said a 17-year-old teenager who went missing 6 years ago was found in France and will reunite with his family in the coming days. Alex Batty was 11 when he failed to return home from a holiday to Spain in October 2017 with his mother Melanie Batty, who does not have legal parental guardianship, and his grandfather David Batty. He is believed to have been adopted by the two to live an alternative lifestyle abroad. Despite international public appeals, Alex's grandmother, Susan Caruana, his legal guardian, had not seen him since he left the UK after 6 years. He was found alive by the chiropractic care student Fabien Assidini, who was doing night deliveries for local pharmacies when he came across him in Revel, near Toulouse in southern France. Now, the teenager is said to have told he had been hiking in nearby mountains for more than 4 days in an attempt to return to England. And now that is all we can bring to you on What Stories Today. Do join us next time. My name is Zainab Ibrahim.